I want to play you a short clip from the Vice President. This is JD Vance. He gave a keynote speech at the Claremont Institute over the weekend. And there were some fascinating insights. And I have to say, his analysis here of the radical left and the danger they pose is spot on.
I was once comforted by these contradictions within the modern left. How could privileged whites march around with a straight face decrying white privilege? How could progressives pretend to love conservative Muslims despite those Muslims' views on gender and sexuality? But the answer is obvious if you think about it, and it's a very, very dangerous and very sad answer. The radicals of the far left, they don't need a unifying ideology of what they're for because they know very well what they're against. What unites Islamists, gender studies majors, socially liberal white urbanites, and big pharma lobbyists, it isn't the ideas of Thomas Jefferson or even of Karl Marx. It's hatred. They hate the people in this room. They hate the President of the United States. And most of all, they hate the people who voted for that President of the United States in the last election in November. This is the animating principle of the American far left.
He put that so beautifully, Josh, the animating principle of the far left, not just in America, but across the West, is their shared hatred. I would argue their shared hatred of the West, of conservatives. It seems to be the only thing that unites them because they share little else in common. Their values are polar opposites in many cases.
So first of all, this is really this speech encapsulates why I, along with many others, wanted JD Vance to be vice president in the first place, because he is of a younger generation. JD and I are of the same generation. We kind of came up with this modern, deeply illiberal left ascendant in the United States and throughout the West more generally. And because we are of this generation, of this age, we fundamentally just kind of see it and get it in a slightly different way. So that is what you heard there at the speech from the vice president. He's totally right, of course, Rita. I oftentimes wonder as well, I actually think about a name that you don't really hear very often anymore, Linda Sarsour. Linda Sarsour was the Muslim girl who was the leader of the Women's March against Donald Trump early in the Trump presidency. Now, Linda Sarsour deleted a lot of her old tweets, but she has this very odd old tweet from like 2011, 2012, around then, where she praises Sharia law when it comes to interest rates on credit card payments or something like that there. And, I mean, let's think about what Sharia law says about, I don't know, the Women's March, like feminism, like women in general there. I'm not sure you want to go there, do you? But ultimately, it's this whole idea of what some people refer to as this red-green alliance between the Marxists, between the communists and the radical Islamists. Zohran Mamdani in New York City is actually a singular one-person encapsulation, frankly, of the red-green alliance there. And JD Vance is totally correct that what they have in common is a deep, utter, dripping disdain for Western civilization, for the Jews and the Christians who have built Western civilization, all that today we call the West. They hate, they want to tear it down. That's what the left, Rita, has been trying to do, at least as far as Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, probably going further back than that to the French Revolution, the Jacobins there. But today, that's all they stand for, and they are just dripping, seething with bitter envy, resentment, and hatred.
And I've got to say, every time I see JD Vance give a speech like that, certain he's going to be president. It seems to be something that you could put the house on. Not that I'm suggesting people go out there and gamble. Now, Josh, I played a clip just a little bit earlier from CNN showing that the polls are clear. We're talking here about polls run by leftist media like the New York Times, CBS, ABC. And these polls show that the deportation program is popular with voters and that a clear majority of Americans want to see every single illegal immigrant deported, not just those who have been convicted of additional crimes. It seems the media and activist classes campaign is not working, Josh, referring to their detention centres as concentration camps and calling ICE agents Nazis. That's not having an impact on the American public.
So this is a crucial point at this particular juncture, Rita, because there's been somewhat of a whisper campaign, a trial balloon happening in some American conservative circles over the past week or so, trying to float this trial balloon of an amnesty program. So Brooke Rollins, who's President Trump's agriculture secretary, has been front and center of this, talking about, oh, maybe we want to help the farmers out, have a greater supply of certain H-2A visas for farm labor there, trying to give more people who are here illegally permits there. But, put simply, the people are not buying it. And above all, Donald Trump's own voters are not buying it. We in MAGA and America First and President Trump's voting base, as someone who has voted for Donald Trump for president numerous times like myself, this is simply not what we voted for. We did not vote to legalize a lot of illegal aliens there. Frankly, we voted for exactly what Tom Homan, the border czar, is doing, which is attempting to lead the largest mass deportation operation in the history of the United States. But as that CNN polling indicates there, it's really not just voters for President Trump like me who actually sympathize with this. In fact, if you look at the polling of Americans who support mass deportation of the country's large and growing illegal alien population now compared to where it was 15 years ago, the percentage of Americans who support that has almost doubled. It was roughly 1/3 during the Barack Obama presidency. It's now 60%, bordering on 2/3 in some polls there. That is a massive, massive change. Donald Trump is himself almost singularly responsible, frankly, for that change. And it would be a total disaster if the pro-amnesty forces somehow win out in this internal struggle. The good news, Rita, is that I'm pretty sure that they're going to fail and fail epically at that.
Now to news broken exclusively earlier today by Fox News, and they reported that former CIA Director John Brennan and former FBI Director James Comey are under criminal investigation for the potential wrongdoing related to the Russian collusion hoax, including allegedly making false statements to Congress. Josh, this is potentially explosive stuff. I would argue this is well overdue. What's your take on this?
My take on this is that Kash Patel was born for this moment. Kash Patel is the FBI director. Kash Patel is one of the first people in the entire American political class who saw the Russia collusion delusion, as I call it, who saw that for what it was, which was this this wild information operation foisted on the American people by the Hillary Clinton campaign and Fusion GPS, this very sketchy outfit along with Perkins Coie, the Tony White shoe law firm there. The Russia hoax is one of the greatest hoaxes perpetrated against the American people in American history, and very few people have actually paid any price. That's maybe the utterly most damning detail. Kevin Kleinsmith essentially got a slap on the wrist, but none of the people who were actually responsible actually served any jail time for Russiagate whatsoever. Kash Patel, back when he was working in the national security establishment there, he was on this since day one. He has always talked about Russiagate. I knew that if Kash became the FBI director, that he would not let it go. So this is looking like a potentially very, very big deal. And again, it's really perfect that Kash, the best guy, is leading it. Finally, I will say this. Especially after what happened with the Epstein files, I think that Kash Patel could definitely use somewhat of a win right now, especially to try to make sure that he is viewed the right way by President Trump's base. I personally, Rita, I'm not necessarily one crying foul as others are. That's not necessarily my hill to die on the Epstein files, but a lot of people in the MAGA movement are very upset with how this has been handled. So I think this is also a politically beneficial move for Kash Patel as well, in addition to the substantive merits of it, which, as you said, are very much long overdue.
Well, Kash Patel, the FBI director, I think does have a problem, Josh. The Jeffrey Epstein issue, I don't think is going to go away. We're hearing some very angry words from very influential people on the right, and I'm talking about people from Tucker Carlson to Jesse Waters from Fox News to Benny Johnson, people who are being very much on the America First bandwagon, but they are just not believing this conclusion. They say there are massive holes in these conclusions and that there has been little transparency. Is this something that Donald Trump can afford to ignore? Does he have to come back to this and have Pam Bondi give a greater explanation of how they've come to this decision and answer some of the glaring questions that remain unanswered?
So the administration has obviously not handled this well. I mean, to be clear, Rita, I am definitely not apologizing for the administration. I mean, Pam Bondi said at one point that the Epstein files were sitting on her desk. She said this during a Fox News interview. And then we saw just a few days ago that the U.S. government, with all of its force and might, said that there actually is no such thing as the Epstein client list. So, I mean, one of these two things clearly is not true. So it seems, I think, on the one end that some people were definitely led to believe that there was a big there that was not there. Personally, I have long believed that the folks who are promising more than there likely is has been trying to, I think, dupe, frankly, a lot of gullible people. The Epstein case back in 2005 was essentially dropped by the Bush era DOJ. It was given to a Palm Beach County, Florida state prosecutor, which frankly makes no sense. And that really was kind of the origin of any cover up, if there was any cover up, was the decision of the Bush era DOJ. That was when I think investigative journalists really should have been sniffing around there. But the fact that 20 years later, then we haven't been able to kind of piece together a lot of the details after a lot of these victims of these horrific crimes have signed non-disclosure agreements, oftentimes have taken large sums of money to not talk there. So I'm not shocked that there's no there, and I think a lot of people do have an explanation to do. I would encourage the President of the United States, Donald Trump, to be the guy to actually get in front of the camera and just explain what happened here. He's the right guy to do it. It would be more credible coming from him and not Pam Bondi at this point, but that explanation definitely is needed at this point, I believe.
Yeah, I've got to say, I've got some major doubts about this one. Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Rita.